My sister cried at her own wedding. Not from joy. From the moment she realized the deposit I'd paid was gone. I didn't make a scene. I didn't show up with a speech. I just stopped a payment, put my phone in my pocket, and went back to watering my plants. That was it. That was the whole thing. And somehow it unraveled 4 years of me pretending that being used felt like being loved. Let me back up. My name is Paige. I'm 31. I work in billing administration for a mid-sized healthcare company, which means I spend 8 hours a day making sure numbers add up and that what's owed gets paid. The irony of that job is not lost on me. I've always been better at tracking other people's debts than my own. I have one sister, Jenna. She's 27. She's the kind of person who walks into a room and recalibrates it. Louder, funnier, more immediately likable than me in every way that shows. Growing up, I was the one who got good grades quietly. She was the one who got standing ovations. My parents never said one of us mattered more. They didn't have to. Some things communicate without words. I started working at 19 to help cover household costs after my dad had a back injury and couldn't work for almost a year. It was supposed to be temporary. That word temporary did a lot of heavy lifting in my family. The situation changed. The expectation didn't. By the time I was 23, I was splitting rent with my parents, covering my sister's car insurance because she was between jobs, and sending money for things I never fully understood but always felt guilty saying no to. A vet bill, a textbook, a trip Jenna needed for her mental health because things had been hard lately. Things were always hard lately for someone else. For me, things were just Tuesday. I didn't resent it. I want to be honest about that. I genuinely didn't. My family needed steadiness, and I happened to have it, so I gave it. What I wanted in return wasn't money. It wasn't even gratitude. Not really. I just wanted to feel like I was part of the thing I was holding up. When Jenna got engaged to her boyfriend Connor last spring, the family energy shifted in the way it always does when something exciting happens to her. My mother called me within an hour of the proposal. She was breathless. She talked for 40 minutes. She mentioned me 3 times, once to ask if I thought the ring looked real in the photos, once to say Jenna wanted me as a bridesmaid, and once near the end, almost casually, to mention that the venue they were looking at required a deposit by the end of the month, and wasn't I so good with money? I didn't say no. I said I'd look into it. The venue deposit was $4,200. I paid it. I told myself it was a gift, a real one, not transactional. I loved my sister. I wanted her wedding to happen. The deposit was just the practical step that made it real, and I happened to be the one who could take it. I put it on a card, set up a payment plan for myself, and didn't mention it again. What I didn't do was make it formal. No contract, no written agreement, no confirmation that anyone else knew exactly where that money came from. That was my mistake. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was me still trying to give without making anyone feel the weight of receiving. The months between the engagement and the wedding were full of small moments I kept filing away and choosing not to examine. Planning calls where my opinions were asked and then quietly set aside. A group chat for the bridesmaids where I was included but rarely addressed directly. A dress fitting where Jenna and my mom spoke to each other in a private language built from 1,000 inside moments I hadn't been part of. None of it was dramatic. That's the thing about being edged out slowly. It doesn't announce itself. You just notice one day that you've been standing slightly outside the circle for so long that it started to feel like where you belong. The seating chart conversation happened about 6 weeks before the wedding. Jenna called on a Wednesday evening. She sounded warm, distracted. She said she and Connor had been going back and forth on the reception layout and they'd finally figured it out. She said it in the easy tone of someone who's already made a decision and is now just informing you of it. I was at my kitchen counter, still in my work clothes, reheating something from the weekend. She said the family table was going to be intimate. Just parents? Connor's parents, his grandmother, and the 2 of them. She said they'd really thought about it and they wanted it to feel close and quiet at the center. And then she said, with the same lightness she might use to mention the weather, that she put me at table 7, with her college friends. I asked her to say that again. She did. She said table 7 was going to be so fun actually, because those girls were hilarious and I'd love them and it would give me a chance to meet people. I set down my fork. I told her I wasn't sure I understood. I was her sister. I was a bridesmaid, and she was seating me with people I'd never met instead of with our family. She said, and I remember this precisely, she said, "You'll be more comfortable there. You know how you get around a lot of family energy." I didn't know how I got. I'd never been given the chance to find out at her wedding. I asked her who was at the family table instead. She named Connor's aunt and cousin, two people I had met exactly once. I didn't raise my voice. I want to be clear about that. I asked one more question calmly. I asked if this had anything to do with the conversation we'd had 2 months earlier when I'd said I couldn't cover the florist invoice because I'd already put in over $4,000 for the deposit and needed to catch my breath financially. There was a pause. She said that was a completely separate thing. She said I was making it about money when it wasn't about money. She said I always did this, made things complicated when she just needed support. She said she was stressed and this was exactly why she hadn't wanted to bring it up. She'd known this was coming and had been managing when to tell me. I said okay. I said I'd let her go. I said we could talk more later. I did not talk to her more later. I sat at my kitchen counter for a long time after the call. My food went cold. I didn't reheat it. I just sat there and did something I'd been avoiding for 4 years, which was adding it all up, not just the $4,200, all of it, the car insurance, the textbook, the vet bill, the 3 months of partial rent when my parents had that rough patch, the birthday dinners I'd covered without being asked, the travel costs when Jenna visited me, and then my parents told me not to let her pay because she was between jobs again. I got to a number somewhere north of $22,000 over 4 years. That's not counting time or emotional labor, just actual transfers and credit card charges. $22,000, and I was being seated at table 7. I didn't cry. I noticed that. I kept expecting to and didn't. What I felt instead was something quieter and more complete. Like a long equation I'd been trying to balance finally resolved itself. And the answer was not what I'd been hoping, but was, at least, clear. I went to bed. I slept. In the morning, I made coffee and stood at the window looking at nothing in particular, and by the time my mug was empty, I knew what I was going to do. Not because I planned it, because it was the only thing that made sense once I stopped trying to make everything okay for everyone else. I had paid the venue deposit on my credit card. The venue had a second payment due 30 days before the wedding. $4,000. They'd sent me a confirmation link since I was the one who'd made the original payment. My name was still attached to the booking. I called the venue the next morning from my car before work. I explained that I'd made an error in the original deposit and needed to understand the cancellation and modification policy. The coordinator was kind. She walked me through it. I asked if the remaining payment was still linked to my card on file. It was. I told her I needed to remove my card from the account. I was no longer the point of contact for this booking. She asked who would be replacing me. I gave her Jenna's number. Then I sat in my car for a moment, engine running, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not vindication exactly. Just stillness. Like I'd finally put down something I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it had weight. I went to work. I answered emails. I ate lunch at my desk. I did not text Jenna. I did not call my mother. I said nothing to anyone. 3 days before the wedding, the venue called Jenna about the outstanding balance. I know how it unfolded because my mother told me afterward, in the kind of fragmented, breathless way people retell disasters. Jenna had apparently assumed the payment was handled, the way things in our family always got handled, which was by me without discussion. When the venue called and said the second payment hadn't come through and the booking would be released if it wasn't settled within 48 hours, Jenna's first call was to my mother. My mother's first call was to me. I was at the grocery store. I let it ring. I finished buying my things, drove home, put everything away, and then sat down and called my mother back. She was not calm. She said there had been some confusion with the venue. She said Jenna was in a panic. She said the wedding was in 3 days and this couldn't be happening, and did I know anything about this? I told her yes, I knew. I had removed my card from the account. Silence. She asked me why. I told her I'd been the one who paid the original deposit, $40,200, and that I'd been planning to cover the remaining balance as well, but that I'd made a different decision after learning where I'd be seated at the reception. More silence, a different kind. Then she said, in a voice I recognized as the one she uses when she's trying not to yell, that this wasn't the time for this. She said I was going to ruin my sister's wedding over a seating chart. She said I needed to think about what I was doing. I told her I had thought about it. I thought about it for 3 days. I'd also thought about the last 4 years. She said I was being cruel. I said I was being accurate. I told her the venue had Jenna's contact information now, and that she'd need to arrange the remaining payment directly. I said I hoped the wedding was beautiful. I said I meant that. She hung up before I did. Jenna called 20 minutes later. I answered. She didn't start with anger. She started with the voice she uses when she wants something, softer, almost gentle. She said there was obviously been a misunderstanding. She said she'd meant for table 7 to be fun. She hadn't meant it as any kind of slight. She just thought I'd enjoy her friends. She said she was sorry if it came across wrong. I noticed she didn't say she'd move me. She said she was sorry if it came across wrong. I told her I appreciated her saying that. Then I told her the payment wasn't coming from me. The gentle voice left. She said I was doing this on purpose. She said I was trying to sabotage the most important day of her life because I was jealous. She said I'd always had a problem with her being happy. She said a lot of things quickly, the way people do when they're scared, and trying to find the version of the story that makes them the victim. I let her talk. When she stopped, I said one thing. I said, "You seated Connor's aunt at the family table, someone you've known for 2 years. I've been your sister for 27. I've also paid more than $22,000 to help this family over the last 4 years, including the deposit for this wedding. I'm not jealous of your happiness. I just stopped paying for a seat I wasn't offered." She said I was making it about money. I said the money was just the part that had a number on it. She hung up. My brother-in-law, Connor, called that evening. He's a decent person. I want to say that clearly because what happened wasn't his fault. He said he hadn't known about the seating situation until that day, and that he was sorry. He said he wanted to fix it. He said he'd personally handle the venue payment if I could just help him understand what had happened. I told him there was nothing for me to fix. I told him his future wife had made a decision about where I belonged at her wedding, and I'd made a decision about my involvement as a result. I told him he should talk to Jenna. He said he would. He sounded tired. I felt bad for him. Not bad enough to write a check, but bad. The wedding happened. I know because my mother sent a photo 2 days later, just one, no message. My parents at the reception smiling. The centerpieces were white and green, exactly what Jenna had described months earlier when she'd been excitedly walking me through her vision on a call where she'd never once mentioned where I'd be sitting. I don't know if they found the money in time. I don't know who paid it or how. I don't know if I was at table 7 or if my RSVP had simply been quietly removed. I didn't go. I had told my mother a week before the wedding in a separate conversation that I wouldn't be attending. She asked if I was sure. I said yes. She said it would hurt Jenna. I said I knew. She said it would hurt her. I said I was sorry for that, and I meant it. She asked what she was supposed to tell people. I told her to tell them I had a conflict. I told her she didn't owe anyone an explanation, and neither did I. I spent that Saturday doing something I'd been putting off for 2 years. I drove to the coast, 3 hours. I went alone, which I almost never do. Not because I don't like solitude, but because I'd been so accustomed to fitting my time around other people's needs that being genuinely free for a full day felt almost suspicious. I didn't know what to do with myself for the first hour. I walked to the beach and felt the particular awkwardness of someone who's forgotten what they enjoy. Then I remembered. I enjoy quiet. I enjoy the feeling of sand through shoes I probably shouldn't have worn on a beach. I enjoy being somewhere where nobody needs anything from me. I ate fish tacos at a place with outdoor seating and watched the water and didn't look at my phone except to take one photo. Just the horizon. Just the place where the ocean becomes sky. I posted it that night when I got home with no caption, just a location tag. The coast. I don't know who saw it first. I only know my mother called that evening and her voice was different from the calls before. Not angry. Something smaller. She said people had seen it. She said Jenna had seen it. She said some of the wedding guests had already been asking why I wasn't there, and that now they were seeing I'd apparently been on vacation instead, and it looked like I'd chosen to skip the wedding deliberately. I said I had chosen that. It wasn't a secret. She asked why I would post something. She said it seemed intentional. I said going to the coast was intentional. Posting a photo is just what people do. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she didn't understand me anymore. I said I wasn't sure she'd understood me for a while. I said that wasn't an accusation. I said I just thought it was probably true. She said she'd always tried to be fair. I said I believed she believed that. We were quiet together for a moment. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, and it was also the most uncomfortable. She told me she loved me. I told her I loved her too. I meant that also. When I hung up, I sat on my couch in the particular quiet of an evening that belongs to you entirely. No calls coming. No requests pending. No version of me being assembled for someone else's comfort. I thought about the $22,000. I wasn't angry about it anymore. I don't think I was ever really angry. Anger requires you to believe something different was possible, and I'm not sure I'd ever fully let myself believe that. What I'd felt, underneath all of it, was grief. Grief that I'd spent years making myself indispensable so that I couldn't be left out, and it turned out those two things had nothing to do with each other. Being needed isn't the same as being included. I had confused them for a long time. A few weeks after the wedding, Jenna sent a message, not a call. A message. It was long, 3 paragraphs, the kind that clearly had drafts. She said she'd had time to think. She said she understood why I was hurt. She said she could have communicated better about the seating. She said she hoped we could move past it. She still didn't offer to move me. Present tense. Still no acknowledgement of the deposit or the 4 years before it. I read the message twice. Then I put my phone down and made dinner. I didn't respond that day. I didn't respond the next day either. I thought about what I actually wanted to say, not what would make things easier. Not would get us back to the version of our relationship where she felt comfortable asking me for things. I thought about what was true. A week later, I replied. I kept it short. I said I appreciated her reaching out. I said I wasn't interested in moving past things without first sitting with what had happened. I said I was open to a real conversation eventually, one where we talked about patterns, not just the one incident. I said I hoped the wedding had been what she wanted. She didn't respond. My mother calls every couple of weeks now. We talk about small things. The conversations are careful, like walking across a floor where one of you isn't sure which boards are solid. I don't mind careful. Careful is at least honest about what it is. I've been to the coast twice more since then, both times alone. Both times I ate somewhere I'd never been and took a photo of whatever caught my eye and didn't explain it to anyone. What I learned is not something I would have chosen to learn. I would have preferred the version where being dependable meant being valued, where showing up financially also meant showing up in the room, where a family table had room for the person who helped build the table. I would have preferred a lot of things, but I've stopped spending energy on the version of my family that doesn't exist. I'm working with what's actually there, which is complicated, and still mine, and something I'm navigating on my own terms now. You can love people and still stop funding a version of them that has no room for you. You can grieve what you wanted and still choose clearly. You can be someone's sister and also be your own first. That's not cruelty. That's just finally knowing which debts are yours to carry and which ones never were. There's a version of this story I used to tell myself where I was just being patient, where the money I sent was generosity, not performance, where staying quiet meant I was easygoing, not erased. I told myself that version for 4 years, and it was easier than the alternative, which was admitting that I had been funding a place at a table that was never actually set for me. What happened with Jenna's wedding wasn't really about a seating chart. I know that now. The chart was just the first time the arrangement became visible in a way I couldn't explain away. Every family has a logic to it, a set of unspoken rules about who carries what and who gets celebrated and who is assumed to be fine. I had followed those rules so consistently for so long that I think everyone, including me, forgot I'd ever agreed to them in the first place. The thing about cause and effect is that it doesn't always look dramatic when it's happening. I didn't storm out. I didn't write an angry letter. I made one phone call to a venue coordinator, removed a credit card, and gave them my sister's number. That was the whole action. But 4 years of choices had been quietly building toward that moment, and 4 years of other people's choices had been building toward it too. When Jenna told me I'd be more comfortable at table 7 with people I'd never met, she wasn't making a small administrative decision. She was completing a pattern, and the pattern completed something in me as well. I think about what it actually takes to change a dynamic that's been in place for years, and the answer I keep coming back to is this: you have to stop being useful in the way that allowed the dynamic to survive. Not out of bitterness, not to punish anyone, just because the old arrangement required a version of you that was willing to keep showing up, underpaid and undervalued, and at some point, that version of you gets tired and sits down and doesn't get back up. What I did took a kind of courage I hadn't known I had. Not the loud kind, not the kind that announces itself, but the quiet kind that just refuses. Refuses to write the check. Refuses to explain itself beyond what's necessary. Refuses to accept that being needed is the same as being loved. The intelligence in what I did wasn't strategy. I didn't plan it for weeks or map out consequences. I just finally saw the situation clearly, without the fog of wanting it to be different, and acted from that clarity. That's the thing about honest thinking. It's not comfortable, but it's clean. Once you see what something actually is, you can't keep pretending it's what you wished it were. And the character it built, or maybe revealed, is something I'm still getting to know. A version of me that doesn't need to be indispensable to feel like she belongs. A version that can love her family and still hold a line. A version that can drive 3 hours to the coast alone on a Saturday and eat fish tacos and not feel like she owes anyone an explanation for her own peace. I didn't win anything. Jenna and I are still figuring out if there's a relationship worth rebuilding, and I don't know yet how that goes. My mother and I talk carefully now, which is its own kind of honesty. These things are unresolved, and I've stopped needing them to resolve quickly. What I have is clarity. What I have is a life I'm no longer shrinking to fit into spaces that were never sized for me. That's not a victory. It's just what happens when you finally stop paying for a seat you were never going to be offered.